The Colosseum is an elliptical amphitheater in the center of the city of Rome, Italy. Despite its age, it is the largest standing amphitheater in the world, with enough room to hold an estimated 80,000 people. The Colosseum was used for gladiatorial contests and public spectacles, including animal hunts, executions, reenactments of famous battles, and dramas based on Roman mythology. Outside of the gladiator games, other shows occurred within the structure given by private individuals rather than the state. These performances had a strong religious element but were also demonstrations of power and family prestige. A gladiator in the Roman Empire was an armed combatant who entertained audiences in violent confrontations with other gladiators, wild animals, and condemned criminals. Most were despised as slaves, schooled under harsh conditions, socially marginalized, and segregated, even in death. Many gladiator schools and amphitheaters were sited at or near military barracks, and some provincial army units even owned gladiator troops. A major attraction within the Colosseum was the animal hunt. This utilized a great variety of wild beasts, mainly imported from Africa and the Middle East, that included creatures such as Caspian tigers, panthers, and Barbary lions. Battles and hunts were often staged amid elaborate sets with movable trees and buildings. During the lunch break period of the animal hunts, they would stage executions. Those condemned to death would be sent to the arena, naked and unarmed, to be literally torn up to pieces. In time, the Colosseum became a site of Christian martyrdom, where Christians were persecuted by the Roman Empire, as evidenced by the church history. Christian tradition ascribes that the Colosseum was the location where Ignatius of Antioch was fed to the lions. On the other hand, other scholars believe that the majority of martyrdoms may have occurred at other venues within the city of Rome, rather than at the Colosseum, citing a lack of still intact physical evidence or historical records. These scholars assert that some Christians were executed as common criminals within the Colosseum, their crime being the refusal to reverence the Roman gods, but most Christian martyrs of the early church were executed at different locations. Within Elden Ring, Colosseums mirror their real-world counterpart, as they reveal a closer look into the history of the lands between. There are multiple reasons as to why the Colosseums were first constructed, such as places to honor the Golden Order, a pit of sacrifice to strengthen the Greater Will's power by feeding the roots of the Erdtree, or as a way for Godfrey and his warriors to release their lust for battle. Many enemies to the Tarnished are associated to the Colosseums, including Crucible Knights, Duelists, Lion Guardians, Fire Chariots, and Mad Pumpkinheads. These large arenas were once used as a place of ritualistic brutality to honor the Greater Will and, by extension, the Golden Order. The Golden Order used these arenas to display their military prowess by achieving victory over their enemies in battle. The bodies of those sacrificed were then sent to the catacombs below to feed the roots of the Erdtree, to provide the Greater Will with energy. Notice how each of the Colosseums are located near catacombs. Each catacomb is either near a minor Erdtree or the Erdtree itself. The Crucible Knights were used to represent the Golden Order in the arena against the enemies of the Erdtree, like the Great Serpent of Mount Gelmir and the Fire Giants from the northern mountaintops. Enemies of the Erdtree were often symbolized by bronze, like the Visage and Coil Shield. The enemies of the Golden Order were defeated again and again in these battles to symbolize their victories that occurred in the past. Audience members of the Colosseum delighted in seeing these bronze effigies beaten and battered. As mentioned, the gladiator games were closely associated with Rome's military. Meanwhile, the Crucible Knights played a big role in the Colosseum, as well as the Golden Order's original military power. Side note, in Sparta, a city-state in ancient Greece that was a military powerhouse, they ritually humiliated the Helots to keep them in their place. The inhabitants of Sparta were stratified as Spartiates, citizens with full rights, and Helots, state-owned enslaved non-Spartan locals. Sparta's famous militarism was inseparable from their all-consuming fear that they had of their oppressed neighbors, the Helots staging a rebellion. Sparta's professional army was only possible by using their enslaved neighbors to farm resources and keep the city-state functioning, while the Spartans honed their soldiering talents. The Spartans' fear of Helot revolt resulted in ritually humiliating them to keep them in a lower perceived social standing. Helots were subjected to various degradations, including forced drunkenness, demeaning public spectacles, and most horrifyingly, ritual murder as a part of a Spartan coming-of-age ceremony. These measures served only to make the Helots hate the Spartans even more, guaranteeing future Helot revolts and worsening Spartan paranoia. There was at least one Helot revolt that led to an agreement in which they were given safe passage to leave under the terms that they would be re-enslaved if they ever tried to return. Sparta was above all a militaristic state, and emphasis on military fitness began at birth. If the baby was born puny and deformed, then it was discarded as a primitive form of eugenics. There is controversy about this matter in Sparta though, since excavations in the chasm where the babies were said to be sent only uncovered adult remains, likely belonging to criminals. Although unable to be proven true, the practice of abandoning deformed babies also reminded me of how those that were born in the lands between with features of the Crucible were either killed or thrown into the sewers below the capital. The duelist helm, modeled after Roman Murmillo gladiator helmets, states that the wearer becomes an easier target for foes, which shows that their defeat was not only frequent, but also that they were given equipment that gave them a great disadvantage in battle. Duelists were used to represent the Great Serpent, which is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree. The duelist's furled finger is used to attack other tarnished in multiplayer. It is a finger of corpse wax with bronze adornments. Corpse wax is used by gargoyles to mend their weapons, as well as their own bodies, a patchwork of champions. If you look at a gargoyle's physical features, they appear to have two heads that have been patched together. This appearance matches the twin sages, Rani's twin faces, and of course, the fusion of Marika and Radagon. Corpse wax may be produced from a body that has been burnt by the black flames of Destined Death. Destined Death was sealed in Amalekith, and there is a gargoyle protecting his alternative form in front of the bestial sanctum. Regardless if corpse wax is a product of Destined Death, the name itself, corpse wax, is made from the dead and therefore could be the same material used to seal living jars. Living jars carry the dead remains of those who have fallen in battle back to the minor Erdtrees to provide them with nutrients. A larger version of a living jar, called the Great Jar, is guarding the entrance to the Helots Colosseum. To gain admission to the Colosseum, the Tarnished must prove their skills against the Knights of the Great Jar, 3 duelist NPC invaders who are most likely contained within the Great Jar as those who have fallen in battle during their time in the arena. Under Roman law, traitors to the state received the most humiliating punishments, like being condemned to the beasts in the arena, with almost no chance of survival. Within the Colosseums of Elden Ring, they once used beasts as well, called Lion Guardians. Lion Guardians are aggressive beasts that fight using blades that are grafted onto their arm. All Lion Guardians are found in regions that are associated with Colosseums, the only outlier being 2 lions found at Castle Sol in the mountaintops of the Giants, a castle that's related to Godwyn. These lions, like Sirash, are visually connected to Godfrey, Godwyn's father, as well as their grafted blades connecting to Godric, kin of Godwyn. An Esidarius was a type of gladiator in ancient Rome who fought from a chariot. Within Elden Ring, there are 2 types of chariots. The first type is simply called a chariot. They are colossal machines found in heroes' graves dungeons. The second type are flame chariots, war machines modeled after the faces of fire giants, mounted with fire-spewing cannons. Redmanes use fire to combat the scarlet rot-infested wilds, which is why you can find them being used within Radagon's ranks. The fire chariots are also found protecting the main gate of the Raya Lucaria Academy, and on the western edge of Mount Gelmir, all locations related to the Carian family. Their mechanical design reminded me of the Abductor Virgins, which also have ties to the Carian family. Mad Pumpkinheads are towering humanoids that wield massive weapons and wear distinctive pumpkin-shaped helmets. These mad soldiers are all that's left of broken gladiators, and they are agitated by bloodshed or the humming of insects. Bloodshed makes sense, as it could be a form of PTSD from their time in the arena. But what about the insects? Could this be a reference to cemetery shades? Insect-ridden gravekeepers? The pumpkin helm being used to ensure that the bugs do not attach themselves to their heads. Interestingly, there is a breed of pumpkin called gladiators. This breed is said to have improved disease protection. Raised next to other pumpkin varieties in field comparisons, gladiators showed improved homozygous intermediate resistances to powdery mildew. During the reign of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, the Colosseums were at their height of glory. This glory was ended with Godfrey's absence of the lands between during the Long March. You could argue that the Colosseums were abandoned over time because while Godfrey was a lord of the battlefield, his predecessor, Radagon, focused more on scholarly pursuits of the Golden Order, like mastering incantations. But, as we discussed in a past video about Damnatio Memoriae, it is possible that the practice of ritual combat in the Colosseums ended out of a political tactic by Radagon in an attempt to condemn the memory of Godfrey and his golden lineage. We find Colosseums in Limgrave, Caelid, and Lindell. The first Colosseum was built in Lindell, within close proximity to the Erdtree, and a place to honor the glory of the Golden Order. The second was established in Limgrave, a territory now ruled by Godric, a descendant of the Golden lineage. The final Colosseum is located in Caelid, and after its combatants had been exiled, they seem to have found a new purpose within General Radagon's ranks. Radagon is also shown to use both Lion Guardians and Flame Chariots, as both are found at Fort Gale, the same location we find the Star Scourge heirloom. Although Radagon's father was Radagon, he looked up to Godfrey as a role model. This is why within Redmane Castle, Radagon is defended by both a misbegotten warrior and a crucible knight, to represent both Radagon and Godfrey, respectively. It's generally accepted that the brick hammer was once Radagon's, meaning that he was the one that once led a rebellion out of revenge, a rebellion that was quelled by Godfrey. This event begins to paint a picture of their rivalry, along with the fact that Radagon's own son admired the first Elden Lord to such an extent that he adorned lions on his armor to display his respect. A respect for a man that once defeated his own father. I believe that Radagon was once a misbegotten himself, a member of a race that was once treated as a lesser than by the Golden Order. This resentment may have fueled Radagon's decision to close the Colosseums in an attempt to erase the first Elden Lord from the history of the lands between. However, the ritual sword talisman says the practice of ritual combat had died out by the time of King Consort Radagon, making it sound like it had died out before Radagon's return to the capital to become the second Elden Lord. Therefore, it is possible that Marika was the one behind the closing of the Colosseums. Marika, due to her being the head of the Golden Order, is also heavily associated with the Colosseum, as her statue can be found at each location, as well as her statue at the Round Table Hold being an access point to travel to the Colosseums directly. Marika could have ended the practice in order to starve the Elden Beast from feeding off of the sacrifices the Colosseums produced. In closing, the Colosseums provide a great deal of historical context for the lands between. They were used to honor the Erdtree and the Golden Order in the minds of the populace, while the bodies that were ritually sacrificed were given to the roots of the Erdtree and minor Erdtrees to power the Elden Beast. The Colosseums were used as cruel institutions to humiliate those that the Golden Order viewed as enemies. Those that survived were either exiled or left broken by the events they experienced within the arena. Death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back. Thank you so much for your time today, and as always, I sincerely hope you have a wonderful week.